Gosavi to deliver her lecture on research opportunity in Germany.
Wearing clothes that are convenient for all these contraptions. So it took the technicians a minute or so. But yeah, this one is different from the rest of the workshop of the day. I will not be talking about plants, I will not be talking about molecules, I will not be talking about research horizon, what does the research landscape in Germany look like, where research in Germany takes place, and so on and so forth. Of course, this session also will in the end have an FAQ thing, but in case any of the words that I use, if the word itself is not clear, then please raise your hand and let me know. Any questions, they can wait till once through with the presentation. Chances are that many of those questions will get answered during the course of the presentation. Starting with the first question, where exactly does research take place in Germany? It's quite similar to where it takes place in the rest of the world. So of course, universities are an important place for research. Non-university research facilities or organizations is the second spot, and the third and rather largest spot is industrial research. As I said, that this is practically where research takes place the world over. Go to any country, there will be some research going on in universities, there will be some research institutions, research organizations, and then there will be the industry. What makes Germany special is the fact that the second one is understood, but even for the third, industry, and the first, higher education institutions, research is a prime thing. It is something on which a lot of stress is laid, a lot of importance is given. The majority of you here are students. Let's just start with higher education institutions. The numbers are there, you can tally them, total them up, but on the whole one can say that there are close to 400 universities in Germany. The number sounds more or less similar to the number of universities in India. India has over 600, and then that might make one wonder how come India have, let's say, 600 universities and how come Germany has about 400 given their geographical expanses. We know the size of Germany, we know the size of India. The main reason here is that, and where it is very different from the Indian system, is that in case of India, I think most of you, those who are students, those who are doing BTechs, you don't quite attend the university. You must be going to your colleges. So India has this big network of colleges which are affiliated to some university or the other. Whereas in case of Germany, if you're studying, then you're mostly studying at a university. There are a couple of universities that might have multiple campuses, but they are the campuses of the university and not some affiliated college. What makes German universities special? It's nothing but the fact that research and teaching, they go hand in hand. So every academician, every faculty member is necessarily involved in active and ongoing research. A large part of this research is also what gets brought to the classroom. It gets conveyed to the students, and then students in turn have to be involved in research. So even at the bachelor's level, one has to have one's own small research theses at the end that one has to submit. The same applies to masters and PhD in any case is a research focus. The strong research orientation and the Humboldtian tradition of research and teaching going hand in hand, and therefore complete freedom for research and teaching is what makes German higher education institutions special. This is followed by the non-university research institutions. I've mentioned 4 here, but these are obviously not the only 4. I've mentioned them here because these are not singular institutions, but more or less like umbrella institutions. So the Max Planck Society, for example, will have 80 plus research institutions and then labs under it. Same goes for Helmholtz, Leibniz, Fraunhofer Gesellschaft and Fraunhofer Society is one that is more into, or that is basically into contract research for the industry. somewhat like the CSIR institutions in India, which produce research that can be turned into products in some manner or the other. The next few slides will allow you to have a closer look at these institutions and their expanses. All these institutions, they are funded by the German government in this manner or the other, and then they carry out research through their institutions. They have their teams. For example, this Max Planck has a staff of over 17,000. The budgets keep on changing, but the numbers here are just so that you get an idea of what kind of figures we are talking about. And when it comes to the subject fields, Max Planck is into sciences as well as humanities and social sciences. The Helmholtz Association is somewhat of a different kind. Helmholtz basically makes available large-scale research facilities. Because if you take a look at the budgets and the number of staff, for example, it is somewhat confusing when you put it together with the number of research centers. So there are fewer research centers which employ a large number of scientists, where a lot of people can carry out their research, and accordingly the money is spent on the research that goes on. We come to Leibniz, again somewhat like the Max Planck but with a different focus point, has again 80 plus research facilities. All these three organizations, these three that I mentioned and many more, they are the places where one can do one's PhDs and postdocs, but more about that later. And the last, the Fraunhofer Society. I don't know how many of the young students know the Fraunhofer Society here, but then I am quite sure that most of them would know the MP3 format of music. And that was invented at one Fraunhofer institution close to a decade ago. The Fraunhofer Society, as we said, it basically does contract research for the industry. So scientists carry out research that can be turned into products that the industry can make use of. And they also started with an office in India recently. Max Planck now has their office in India, so does the Fraunhofer. And both offices are doing extremely well. Point that we mentioned in the morning, India is certainly being seen as a country to be partnered with for combined researches and combined initiatives. And these are the other kinds of organizations. There are a lot of federal research. When I say federal, what I mean is they're funded by the German government, either by the central government, or the second ones, the lender institutions that you say funded by the state government. But yeah, these are basically state-funded institutions active in research. These can be standalone laboratories, standalone institutions, or a group of a couple of research centers, but they all fall into that. And then 10 very well-known academies of science, such as the Leopoldina. This is where research in Germany takes place. But then when I say it like that, it all appears somewhat more abstract for our young researchers perhaps. So let's get into a little more detail. Before that, the research in industry. One special thing about research that goes on in Germany is also the fact that industry is actively involved in research, and the industry actively funds research. And that is actually a very important point that keeps the research in Germany going. So you can see that it's the state that funds the research, it's also the industry that funds the research. Almost 3/4 of research funding in Germany comes through the private sector. It's a simple graphic. As they say, graphic speaks more than what words can convey. We can see where the public funding goes in, which institutions take public funding, which ones get more of private funding, who is into basic research, who is into applied research. In the morning I had mentioned that Germany is anyway one of the popular destinations for students the world over, for researchers the world over. It's amongst the first 3 of the top destinations for researchers and students. And one thing that very often one doesn't know sitting here in Germany, the fact that German campuses are very, very international. Traditionally, Indians are brought up with the associations of, where would you like to go for your higher studies? The standard answers used to be till some time ago, well, the US, UK, perhaps Australia, because one always has some uncles, some aunts, some seniors, some friends, someone or the other there. But if you look at the data, because numbers make many things clear that we tend to ignore at times, close to 12% of students in Germany are international students. And if you compare, not in sheer numbers, but in percentages, the US as of now has about 4% of students that are international students. So we tend to undermine the fact as to how many foreigners are actually active in Germany. And in case of Indians, in any case, there are 12,000 plus, close to 12,000 students. And then after that come all the research scholars who go there. After that come all the scientists and academicians and your faculty members that have different kinds of cooperations, collaborations with Germany and German universities. So India is very much present in the German research horizon as well. Regarding the students and researchers or young researchers going to Germany, one major breakthrough happened with German universities introducing the so-called international degree programs. These programs are offered in English medium because of course it's Germany, and then German language could have been a hurdle of sorts for someone who wanted to start with one's master or PhD in Germany. So that hurdle doesn't exist anymore. Of course you can do much better if you speak the local language, wherever you may be. Why should Germany be an exception? But in order to go to Germany for one's master's or PhD or so, German language is no longer a hurdle. One can study completely in English medium. Even when it comes to the PhD, what Germany has also started offering are the so-called structured PhD programs. Structured PhD programs are, as the name suggests, they are the structured programs. So they have a definite syllabus that you have to master in the initial year or 2 of your research. Followed by that, you carry on your research. What generally happens is that being a part of a structured PhD program, you are part of a research group. So there are many others besides you who are working on various aspects of the problem that you've identified. So if you're someone who thinks better with team, who can work better with team, who needs inputs from others in order to be able to function most productively, then something like a structured PhD can be a good idea for those of you who are considering a PhD in Germany. Generally takes about 3 years time. That is also another attraction that Germany offers, a PhD in 3 years. The 2 websites that you see, they are databases of these international degree programs. In the morning when you came in, certain leaflets and brochures were distributed about PhD in Germany, Masters in Germany. All these databases that are mentioned in the presentation are a part of that, and I still see the bags there, so please help yourselves to the leaflets at a later point in time. Of course, it's not always possible to have a certain research idea, to have identified a problem, and then to find exactly the same thing for a structured PhD. Excuse me. If that were to happen, the traditional or the individual PhD model is obviously available in Germany, where you need to identify your problem, you need to identify a professor in Germany who is willing to act as your guide, and then your research begins. This is very much your own research, as they say, because in case of Germany, the way research happens or the way education happens is quite different from what one is used to expecting in India. In Germany, PhD is actually your own baby. So you have to be able to conceptualize, you have to identify the problem, you have to decide what kind of procedures you have to follow, what kind of steps you take, what your methodology will be. Your professors are there to guide you, but guide you provided you have delivered something to start with. When it comes to the point of doing one's research, funding is the logical next question. And that's what brings me back to the slide that we saw right at the beginning. Depending upon where one would like to do one's research or with which organization one would like to collaborate, there are different funding mechanisms in place. They can be seen as such. The primary sponsors we've already discussed, it's mostly the state, at times the industry and so on and so forth. And then come the secondary sponsors. These are not the only three, but then we've mentioned them here for the ease of reference. German Research Foundation, the DFG, the DAAD or the German Academic Exchange Service, Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Though we will go in details of funding possibilities of the DAAD later, it helps to know that besides the DAAD, there are many other research funding organizations, many other possibilities available for collaborative research as well as for individual research. The political foundations, business foundations, and various other things. And again, Germany is a rather systematic country, and so even a complete database of all such funding possibilities is also available on this funding-guide.de. That brings us to the DAAD scholarships. We'll talk about that, and if you have questions about the specific scholarships, we can also tackle them later. The DAAD scholarships can broadly be divided into three different groups. There are individual scholarships. So for example, if you as a faculty member or if you as a student would like to go to Germany to carry out your research or to do your PhD, then you can opt for one of the individual scholarships. There are cooperation or project-based programs which involve groups of researchers, one from India and one from Germany, or institutions, one from India or one from Germany, or departments within an institution. And then of course, for those who have already got DAAD funding, there are various other means of funding for DAAD alone. Amongst the individual scholarship programs, again there is a division. There are certain programs for students, certain for graduates and doctoral students, and then postdocs or seniors. I think most of you are past this stage, so I will not dwell with the programs for students here. What would be more interesting are programs for those who have already completed their bachelor's. The APOS program is a program that is especially for people who already have a degree and have experience in some subject that is seen of relevance to developing countries. So it can be public health, it can be public policy, it can be good governance. And for subjects such as these, there are scholarships available within DAAD. Then for those who want to do their complete PhDs in Germany, that is a possibility. And for those of you who are registered at any university in India and are carrying out your PhD, you have the so-called sandwich model possibility, which is actually a very unique thing that allows you to get the best of both worlds. What it means is because you're registered at an Indian university, you carry out a year or two of your research here, then you go to Germany for 1 year for part of your research, you carry it out there, you come back, you complete your PhD work and you submit it. So though you get the degree from your Indian university, you have the experience from both parts of the world. For the seniors, for researchers and faculty members, there are the research stay programs wherein one can go and work with one's partner, research partner in Germany for a duration of about 3 months. That's the first program. Then there are guest lecturerships in both directions. So Indian professors can go and teach at German universities for 1 semester to 4 semesters, and German professors can come and teach at Indian universities or conduct block seminars, as they're called, or workshops. There are cooperation-based programs, one that I mentioned in the morning, the Indo-German Partnership Program, that is the newest one. that connects two institutions together. Then there are university business partnership program. I would not want to dwell much in these at this point of time, because then every idea is unique and so is every program. So in case any one of you has any idea for anything that you think would go along these lines, feel free to get in touch with the DAD at any point of time, and the concerned colleague will be very happy to get back to you. Well, this was practically about the number of DAD scholarships that are available. Are there any questions about what we've covered till now? Yes, please.
What is the selection criteria? What is the selection criteria for the sandwich program?
Criteria for the sandwich program. Yeah. For the sandwich program, the basic criterion is that you should be registered for a PhD at a Indian university. Secondly, whatever part of your research you want to carry out in Germany should be an important part of your PhD. Ideally, it should not be an accidental part of it. It should really belong to your research. And besides, you will in any case have a guide on the Indian side. You also need to identify a guide on the German side who's willing to guide your research for that 1 year.
It is mandatory. We have an MOU between the both.
No MOU is necessary, but your guide on the Indian side should be in agreement with the fact that you would like to go to a specific guide in Germany. No MOU is required, but if your two guides are already in touch with each other, that always helps you.
Funding for to and fro motion and
for all the DAAD scholarships that I mentioned, it's a very good question, thanks a lot. What the DAAD funds is the so-called mobility funding. Yeah, so basically it's the travel and stay. That is what the DAAD takes care of. So it's travel and stay and health insurance and so on. So that you get the figures. For a PhD or for a sandwich model, normally the scholarship is 1,000 euros a month. And in addition to that, the airfare to and fro and the medical insurance. And in case you are taking your family, then there is some extra allowance. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Yes, so sorry.
I'm just wondering about the selection criteria you mentioned. Criteria for the DAAD for scholarship. I'm just wondering what is it, apart from the research topic that he's into or she's into. Because there is also a problem that when you try to contact the German professors there, it seems that they are a little busy, they don't even reply back. I faced the same problem when I was trying to my PhD. And what is the best way of contacting them? Is there a better way of getting in contact?
You've asked me a question that suggests that I should actually go to the next part of the presentation. Excuse me, I hadn't started off with it because I did not know if there was any interest in it at all. Is this a question for anybody, how to approach German professors? The hands that are going up are increasing. Yes, because I will take your question. Yeah, as you rightly said, you need to have a letter of invitation in case of any of the DAAD funding programs. Without that, one can't even apply. So that is not even the selection criterion, that is the basic requirement of an application. That you need to have a letter of invitation from your German professor or from your German counterpart, as the case may be, depending upon whether you're a student or a researcher. And it is not always easy. Those who've been to Germany, for the seniors it's not so much of a problem, but those who are just about to begin their connection with Germany, it is certainly a question that is boggling, to say the least. And the sources are obvious, but then besides Googling, there are many better websites that have been created that give proper information about what kind of research is going on, where, at which institutions, and who all is carrying out that kind of research. So the websites mentioned here would be important sources of information. So would be the journals and the publications that one refers to. So I think when it comes to the sources, one has to think beyond Google and go to the appropriate parts. And it will not be extremely difficult to come up with a list of potential professors you might want to approach if you have exhausted studying these lists. Contacting the host professor is the trickiest of the parts. And this is the thing in which especially the young researchers have to invest a lot of time in, and there is no standard recipe, but then only 3 points to remember. 3 points that should be clear to the researcher, to the young researcher himself or herself, and 3 points that should be made clear in the very first communication that goes to the professors. What exactly it is that you would want to do, why do you want to do that kind of research with that particular professor, under the supervision and guidance of that particular professor at that particular university. And then of course, why should the professor consider you? It's practically about identifying one's own USPs. What makes you as a candidate special, and why is that university or that institution the most relevant one for you? The standard way of sending a 2-liner attached, please find my biodata, mostly doesn't work because, as you said, German professors, or professors in general, the world over, they get a lot of communication requesting them to be guides or supervisors and so on and so forth. So it's extremely important to draft a neat, short, very brief letter or email that doesn't run into more than 3 or 4 paragraphs, where it's very nicely highlighted, where you highlight these 3 points. Another thing that helps is that in case you have your seniors there, or in case you have your professors or the team leaders of your research groups, then please ask them to put in a word, which they will if they are convinced with your caliber again. And then once in a while, a repeat communication also helps. So while there is no magical answer, one has to do all these things rather systematically and strategically. Otherwise, it's difficult. Clearly, because the demand and supply.
The reason that I asked this question is, will exactly be a financial who are looking at it?
No, the DAAD will not be able to do any kind of matchmaking, as it is typically called. The websites that were mentioned here, what the DAAD does is basically, what the DAAD basically does is to take care of these websites. So the DAAD creates the data, it gathers the data, it puts the data in place. But then beyond that, actually connecting you with your potential counterpart is not really something that they do. It is quite different from the way in which, let's say, some countries like Canada and all operate. But that has been the German way. This is more for those who have never done this before, and then this is not something that applies to Germany, but this is about in general applying to for any seat, for any university abroad. What are the do's and the don'ts? I will not really say them aloud because some of you might smile at some of these, some of you might find it useful. But then this is being made on the basis of the feedback that we get from German professors who come to us for various selection committee meetings and so on and so forth. Talking about the selection criteria, what happens in general for all of the DAAD funding possibilities, for all the DAAD scholarships, is that DAAD has selection committees which consists, if the selection is going to happen in Germany, then solely of German professors. If it is going to happen in India, then it consists of an Indo-German selection committee or selection panel. And then each and every application is scrutinized by this panel. And then in case of the PhD and the sandwich model programs, candidates also have to face interviews. And then at the end of that, the scholarships are awarded or not awarded, as the case may be. But these are things that appear very small, but assume greater dimensions, because everybody who's applying for a PhD abroad is all said and done somewhat desperate, somewhat at the end of one's rope, so to say, And in that, a lot of things one just tends to overlook, and then that is precisely not what should happen. Also important is doing some groundwork about whatever is going on, about what you're doing, where you're, to whom you're writing, which institute, what professor, how to address people in the context of a certain country. These are final things which go a long way when it comes to getting a response from your desired professors. Most of the DAD scholarships again also demand submission of a brief research proposal. So this research proposal has to be ready right at the time of application. It is not quite possible to delay it, to further it by any means. And then on what basis is it judged? It's the originality of the research concept, of the research idea, knowledge of the field, and how much effort the applicant had put into the application. Yeah, what I had to say was this much. If there are questions, we still have time. There can also be questions about masters, because I was given to understand that a lot of participants today are actually B.Tech or Bachelor of Science students. So in case you have any questions about masters, do feel free.
Does any German university or professor in German university provides the position like graduate research assistantship or like that?
In Germany, one does not have to pay tuition fees, but the tuition fees are extremely low, in the range of 500 euros a semester or so. So that being taken care of. The next question, coming to the next part of your question about research assistantships, of course there are. In Germany, one does not have to pay tuition fees, but the tuition fees are extremely low, in the range of 500 euros a semester or so. So that being taken care of. The next question, coming to the next part of your question about research assistantships, of course there are.